Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Well, good morning, everybody. It's Rob Godlewski with the Think Small podcast. And today our guest is Bill Black. Bill is the CEO of National Fleet Management. Bill, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Rob, thank you. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, Bill, tell us a little bit about National Fleet Management, how the business got started and what problems you solve for your customers.
Okay. Well, National Fleet Management, we are a commercial vehicle repair facility. We also have a parts business and we also sell used vehicles. So it's very vertically integrated with the commercial vehicle industry. We currently have four shop locations, all in North Carolina, one in Charlotte, one in Greensboro, one in Raleigh-Durham, and one in Statesville. The Statesville location also has a used truck dealership on it. And then our parts business is in Wilson. Then we also have 35 mobile trucks in 9 states, which is North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And I missed one. There's another
That's
there's
okay.
another state out there. Yeah, there's another state out there. I'm not sure which one it is.
I'm sure our audience can go on your website and find out that last
Yeah,
state.
it's out there.
Yeah. So you service all sorts of commercial trucks, right? Ambulances, delivery vehicles, tow trucks, recovery vehicles. I mean, all sorts of trucks, right?
Yeah, so I say a lot of times we'll work on anything from a pickup truck to fleet of pickup trucks to fleet of tractor trailers. What we don't work on is like, little Jimmy's Honda Civic or, a minivan or something like that. So as long as
Sure, that makes
it's owned by
sense.
a commercial company or held, being used for commerce.
So Bill, how did you get into this business? And when did you found the business?
So I got into this business. My dad had a welding and repair shop when I was growing up. So this is something that I've always done. Since I was old enough to walk, I was in the shop, cleaning and, then started working on things. And so I really liked working with my hands and I was pretty decent at it. When I got out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps, went in open contract thinking they would make me an infantryman or a grunt. And they did, and they made me a mechanic. So I was like, man, this must be what I'm supposed to do. So I had a fairly successful career in the Marine Corps, got meritoriously promoted and did some pretty cool stuff while I was there. And then when I got out, I worked for a fleet and then worked for another fleet before getting into the dealership world. And then in the dealership world, started as a technician, worked my way to shop foreman, then a service manager. And then the last position I held was operations manager over multiple locations, parts, service, body shop. We actually opened a couple new locations, one new dealership, and a couple independent repair shops within our AOR. So I would hire managers and then train them and then support them and help them grow their business units. Started National Fleet in 2008. That's when we got incorporated and then really got kicked off in 2009. And the vision was always National Fleet Manager was to go national with it. So when I started, it was myself and I hired a technician and we had 1,500 square foot of flex space with a 12-foot door. So, I mean, we couldn't even work on tractor trailers inside. And then today we've got, and I know you didn't ask me this question, but it kind of flows into it. Today we have about 120 team members. I mentioned the
Wow.
locations, the service trucks, and things of that nature. And the goal and the vision is to go, across the country and make it national fleet management.
Well, you've named it appropriately, that's for sure. And
Thank you.
before we move on, I definitely want to say thank you for your service to our country. That's very
Oh,
important.
yep. You're welcome. And it was my pleasure. I'd do it again.
Yeah. So founding the business in 2008, you and one mechanic in a space you couldn't even fit a tractor trailer to repair. Is that kind of where you got the idea to, hey, maybe I should take this show on the road, literally, and be a mobile service provider to your customers?
Yeah, so mobile was, it's the easiest entry into the market.
Okay.
So, you could go mobile and you could, you got a shop on wheels, you can go anywhere. The vision was always to have the shops there to support mobile, to be kind of a one-stop shop for the customer. I don't want to be just a company that just can do general repair and mobile. and then
Okay.
not be able to do because of my dealership background. I wanted to bring the vision for National Fleet Management too, not isn't just go national, but it's to bring the dealership level of professionalism and technical ability to the aftermarket. So, in the trucking industry, we're typically 15 to 20 years behind the car guys, when it comes to our business model.
Hmm.
So currently you could go into an independent car automotive repair business with a check engine light on a car that's maybe 3 or 4 years old, and you can buy it. It needs an ECM. You can diagnose it with your Snap-on tool, and then you can buy that ECM from Napa. You can put it in the car, and you can reprogram that ECM, and you can put a warranty on it, and the car leaves, and everybody's happy. So and when you go to these independent car places, the people are dressed professionally, they look professional, they've got a nice waiting room, and it looks kind of like a little dealership. The only difference is you can't buy a car there. So that's where the vision for National Fleet was like, hey, I think the trucking industry is going that way, and I don't think it's going to take me 20 years, to see that vision and then to execute on it. So now it's been 16 years and we're not nationwide, but when you go into our locations, we can build engines, we could do diagnostics, we do DPF cleaning, after treatment, HVA, AC work. Um, Unfortunately, the industry, because of the Right to Repair Act, really hasn't caught up to us. So, we can't
Hmm.
reprogram ECMs. We can't buy our ECMs from Napa. All that stuff is still being held up through legal regulations, getting us the information. Where on the car side, that information's being released after a certain period of time. And the vehicles are out of warranty and things of that nature.
So are you saying you're not allowed to do certain repair work on a commercial vehicle?
I shouldn't say that
Um,
we're not allowed. We don't have the like you can't find a Snap-on tool that'll program a truck ECM. So it's not that we're not allowed. We just don't have the capability to do it. So maybe
okay.
that's a play with words, but the OEMs, there's some legislation that's been going on for years. It's called the Right to Repair Act. So what
Hmm.
that is, your commercial vehicle organizations that I'm a part of, these independent repair shops that are requesting access to that data like the automobile industry has. So once you
Okay.
get
The
into the
OEMs are just kind of holding that back then.
yeah, they're not the government hasn't made them do it, and they have no incentive to do it because why would they do that? Then, they're going to lose potential revenue that goes through their dealership. And then if you're able to remove some of the patents or the ability for aftermarket to build ECMs and things of that nature, in the aftermarket, then they lose that revenue stream. And I don't know all the details of this, but this is my understanding
Sure.
of what's going on. Somebody listening to this might say, "Hey, Bill, you're way off track," but that's my understanding of what this is about, and it makes sense to me that that's what's holding us up from being able to buy an ECM from Napa, program it with a Snap-on tool or a Diesel laptop tool or a J-Pro tool. It's just the manufacturers withholding that information.
Interesting. So you're at about 18 years now of National Fleet Management being in business. Tell us about a time when you were ramping up sales, but sales started to plateau a little bit, right? There was
Mhm.
something going on in the economy or via a competitive threat or something. But tell us about how you managed the business through a time of plateauing or contracting sales.
So, knock on wood, we had one year where sales contracted, and that was the year of COVID. And it wasn't
Okay.
because sales weren't there, it was because we put everything on pause. We had been on a growth trajectory that was very, very good. We had great momentum, and then when COVID hit, we hit the pause button, and we just
Okay.
paused too long. But since we've started the business, knock on wood, we've never had a year like last year we grew about 21%. The year before that was 40, the year before that was 38. So
That's outstanding, Bill.
we've always been in like the high teens to, in the early days it was easy to grow. It was easy to double in a year when you're only a couple $1 million a year. So sales has not been really an issue for us. It's been, managing cash, hiring the right people, scaling, adding layers of leadership at the right time.
Hmm.
It's been things like that. It hasn't been a
Okay.
lack of work. And I've got a sales leader that's been with me, gosh, probably 10, 11 years. He came in really early when we started to open new locations. And yeah, we talked, both of us will tell the story during the interview. He came down and he was actually living in Atlanta. He came down and after about an hour, we're like finishing each other's sentences. And he's been an integral part to us growing the business when we do go into new markets. But in our industry, the good news is that the bar is really low, and the bad news is the bar is really low. If you do what you say and you say what you do, and you communicate with our customers, and you do quality repairs in a timely manner at a fair price, you'll do just fine. Um,
Okay. Well, tell us then about a time when you were experiencing rapid expansion and rapid growth,
yeah,
and how you navigated the business to that point. As we all
yeah,
know, times of rapid growth brings a whole different set of challenges to a business.
yeah.
So tell us about how you navigated that, not only from the business and operational perspective, but also the employee side.
Yeah. So, we're really coming out of a big transition period for National Fleet over the last 2.5 years. So one of the things we were running into in the local markets, like a ceiling for the mobile department where we weren't able to get past a certain level. And the mobile trucks were being operated underneath the shops. And I did some research, I went to some of my competitors and started studying what they did and how did they grow their mobile and what the ones that had shops and mobile and what were they doing. And what I found is what they would do is they would create two departments, like a mobile department and a shop department, and hire, like, okay, Rob, you're in charge of mobile, Bill, you're in charge of shops. And then your job, Rob, is to grow mobile, and Bill's job is to grow
Sure.
shops. And then, there wasn't as much distraction because, if you're a manager running a shop facility, you're going to tend to favor one over the other. And the shop is typically the one that gets favored because you're hiring a shop manager to manage a shop, and they don't really understand mobile, or they
Sure.
just don't have the capacity to do that. And we wanted to build some consistency too in the mobile department. And the other thing we were doing in our Greensboro location, that's where all our admin was, and it was outgrowing the facility. So we moved the admin out of our Greensboro location, moved all the mobile department into what we call our HQ, our headquarters, added a layer of leadership and built an infrastructure under mobile. And this all leads to your question. Growing and scaling sucks cash. It burns cash.
Hmm.
I don't have an MBA. You heard my story. I went from high school to Marine Corps to a technician and worked my way up. If you see my
Sure.
bookshelf, my bookshelf is full, but it's like too deep. There's books behind the books. Um, I'm probably investing close to $100,000 a year on myself for coaching, consulting. Now, I couldn't always do that in the beginning, but I read a lot.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
get in peer groups and learn and continue to learn and grow. And in doing that, you learn that cash is critical. I'm the sole owner of the business. Currently, we don't even have a line of credit. We cash flow the business on our own because during that time, I started to use leverage and credit probably more than I should, and I learned I
Mhm.
almost ran out of money is basically what happened.
Okay.
Um, and luckily, I have a lot of friends, peers. These are competitors that are in our industry in different areas. Some of are in our area, but this is a tight knit industry. So you build friends. So I mean, I'm like calling these guys like, "Hey, I'm growing," and they're like, "Yeah, man, you're killing over there." I said, "Yeah, dude, I'm running out of money," and they just kind of laugh. They're like, "Yeah, that's part of it."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're learning that lesson. So. I think that's been probably one of the, and we're working on, like I said, we don't use our line of credit. We're building up some cash. Um, but it makes you more, because when you're growing, it's easy to grow and just look at the number on the top and
Sure, sure.
understanding, profit, cash, not so much profit. I understood profit, but understanding cash flow, um, that's probably been my biggest area of study, I'd say the last year and a half. And, without me fully engaging in that, I don't know what could have happened, but I think that's probably um, the biggest challenge or the biggest,
So so you pivoted your organizational structure to handle the growth you were experiencing, right? You created two separate business units that
yeah,
I mean, I can only imagine where your cost basis and your SG&A for a a branch or a branch level business is very different than a mobile business. So I think that
yeah.
made all the sense in the world, Bill.
Yeah, it really did. It just, it's interesting because when you do that, you have to you realize, hey, there's going to be a time where things are going to be well. I mean, there the last year or two, not this past year, but like I expected to lose money, but after depreciation, we're buying, 7 to 10 new trucks at some $100,000 a piece, and then you've got all this investment that you're putting in the business, and you're doing that with full understanding, like we need to grow at the same time, because we need to outrun this, or we need to stay at least far enough ahead of it that we don't run out of money.
Hmm.
And, I knew that, but I also don't have a big investor behind me, and we're not owned by private equity that could say, you know, take a little pressure off, so to speak. It's like, hey, we've got some resources, we didn't. So, that was, me putting a lot of pressure on the leadership team, with growing their business, adding technicians. One of the other things we did prior to last year, we had like one HR generalist. Well, now we've got 3 people in our HR department, because we're constantly recruiting, and now we're having to develop our leaders, so it's much more detailed and refined HR department than somebody that would typically be we did just over 30 million. Typically a $30 million company might have one HR person. Well, we have the infrastructure built now that we could go to 100 million without adding maybe a couple, clerks, to handle some of the volume. We're
Right.
using AI and automating things. Um, so now, it's just like now it's all about, okay, let's add quality technicians and let's grow the top line because all the gross profit is dropped through. Um,
Right. You're
so
leveraging your current SG&A level
yes, because that's
to
always the challenge is like how big do your because if you outrun your support, you just make a mess. And if
right.
you're too heavy on support, you run out of money. So there's that constant battle, not battle, balancing act that, I have to be
Mhm.
conscious of and then make sure that the leadership team is conscious of it. So those are conversations that we're constantly talking about and having. And, and you mentioned like different departments, business units. And one of the guys I was talking to is one of the bankers. He's like, "You really got 5 businesses." I said, "No, there's really just one. It's National Fleet, and the parts business is branded differently, but it's like a sister company." He's like, "No, you have a mobile, you have a shop, you have a used trucks, you have parts, and you own some real estate. Because we own some of our facilities currently." Uh,
Oh, okay.
I was like, "Wow, yeah, you're right.
I guess I do.
I guess we do, yeah." Um, and in doing that, as we were scaling and growing too, we needed to separate all the financials because I needed to make
Right.
sure one business unit isn't propping up another one and making us
Artificially.
making looking better than we really are. Because there might be a business unit that no longer makes sense. It's like, hey, is this just a money pit? We're dumping, resources into this business and we're not getting anything in return. What if I took those resources and
Mhm.
if I outsourced that and then I dump those resources into mobile or the shops or something else? what would that look like? And does that make sense? So those are constant analysis, that we're looking at is like, okay, what do we need to do to make this profit center a good investment, um, that's sustainable?
And that makes a lot of sense, right? When you're a smaller business, you just don't have the scale to separate out separate businesses like that. But as you
Yeah,
grow, you do need to start looking at where is your revenue coming from and where is your gross margin and your ultimately your net profit coming from, and pivoting those businesses and maybe even making the hard decisions as to letting one of those five businesses go at some point
yeah,
because it's
you're right.
dragging down the other four.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like if you could do half the work and make the same amount of money, and then you could take and double that, what you've done, what you could do half at. It's
Exactly.
like, okay, well, what if we took all these resources and put them over here? Then
Right.
you're doing the same amount of work and you're making three times the amount of money. So, and it's not all about money. Don't get me wrong, but you have to be profitable to stay in business.
Of
My
course.
my personal mission statement and the company's mission statement is to positively impact the world or the people in our business, and by giving them careers and giving them opportunities to grow and do things like that. What that does not mean is you sanction incompetence and that this is a socialist company. It's like, no, we want to attract and keep the people that are high performers. Like I tell a lot of people, I said, I don't want everybody to want to work at National Fleet. I just want the top 10%. Because if you come here and you work really hard and you perform, you will make more money and you will be rewarded, I believe, better than anybody else in our industry. But if you come here and you don't perform, you probably won't be here very long.
Mhm.
So I want some folks to say, hey, I hear they got great benefits. They treat their people well. You can make more money there than ever, but I'm not going over there. They work too dang hard. It's great. Don't even apply. And
Not
we've
the place
spoken,
for you. Right.
yeah, not the place for you. But if because I believe, Rob, I believe there's guys and gals out there that are sitting in a place that's fairly stagnant and they're rock stars. They want to come to work here. You mean I could go there and I could start with a small business unit and if I want, I can make it a big you could yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Come to me, come here, prove to me that you can take the resources, I'll allocate resources to you and you'll use them, be a good steward of them and grow them, then I'll give you more assets to steward and grow. It's like my faith is a big part of who I am, so I use a lot of biblical, military, or sports analogies. But
Hmm.
the parable of the talons, in the Bible, one person invests those in his talons. He's given those. He invests them. And he multiplies them, and then
Hmm.
another one kind of just keeps them in a savings, but very conservative. And then the other one just hides them on his mattress.
Hmm.
And when the boss, so to speak, or when the master comes back and the one who just hides them and does nothing with them, he gets scolded for not doing anything, for not creating anything. The one in the middle gets kind of like, you did okay. But the guy that multiplied them and grew them, he gets more resources. Here's
Right.
some more talons. Go do what you just did there. Um, so when I look at, like I said, when I look at business, I use a lot of biblical analogies because they just apply. Um, Not because I'm a Christian and not because my faith is a big part of it. They just apply.
They just apply.
They just
They make
apply.
sense.
It's kind of like, we get, and not to get political, but there's always a big thing whether you should put the Ten Commandments in a school or a public place is like,
Hmm.
what don't you agree with there? Don't kill, don't steal, I don't know what's bad about that, but all right. And then sports, one of the things, because we have such a tight culture, we sometimes people say, "Oh, this it's like a family business." I'm like, "No, we're not a family business." I said, "You can't get fired and you can't quit a family."
That's right.
I said, "We have a team atmosphere. Now, you can come here and become part of a team, but a team member, they do their job, they work as a team. There's a
Hmm.
lot that goes into." the difference between a family business and a team. So even though I've had some siblings and some of my kids have worked here in the past, they get treated the same as everybody else, probably worse, to be honest with you. They'd tell you that. Um, but I see the business as like a stewardship. You know, I believe again, my faith, not you I know this isn't a faith-based, I don't know if it is or not, podcast, but I believe
Not
that I'll
specifically, but
be,
that's okay.
yeah, I believe that I'll stand before God and I'll answer for how I stewarded this business, how I
Hmm.
treated the people, how I treated my vendors, how I treated my customers, how I managed my money. Um, and that's just what I believe, and you can believe that or you cannot believe that, but that's what I believe and that's how I operate.
And Bill, if you weren't doing a good job with stewarding your business, it would show a lot
I
sooner
believe,
than
yeah,
you
I believe
arriving at
that.
the pearly gates, let
Yeah.
me tell you.
Yeah. Well, and and I believe that too, but I also believe that there's a lot of people out there that are crooked, they're
Yes.
greedy, and they'll die rich. You know, they might not have much peace, or they might not have, they might not have may have a hard time sleeping at night, and they may have all these other issues. Um, but I sleep pretty good at night. I
Hmm.
make hard
Hmm.
decisions that affect people personally that I believe are the right decision, and it may affect them negatively in the beginning. In the end, I believe it's good, but I do what I believe is right, whether it's a severance package or something that helps that person if the situation warrants it. Now, if somebody steals or does something or just totally disengages, you know, I don't believe that warrants a certain amount of grace. Um, and I don't. There are nights that yeah, I'll lose sleep. If I have to let somebody go the next day, and I know that hey, this person just the seat outgrew their capacity,
Yeah.
and there's just no place for them. They'll get a nice severance package. They'll
Mm.
they'll get a good reference, and I'm probably going to lose some sleep that night.
Yeah. Yeah.
But after that, I'll know that I believe that I've done everything that I could have or should have to help that person, to the next part of their life.
And, and Bill, those are very tough decisions to make as a business leader.
Yeah.
Um, but not making a move like that after you've been thoughtful about what's really right for the business and for the employee, not making the move has a greater effect on the people that remain in the business.
It's not fair to them. Yeah,
It
because
it is not fair to them, correct?
if I work for you and I'm not capable of doing my job and you have to hire somebody else to do half my job for me,
Right.
now you're paying two people to do one job, and not only is that not fair to the team, because now the team says, well, Bill only has to do half his job and get paid the same amount of money as me, but you also, if you have a boss, which I believe my boss is in heaven, you like if you have shareholders, they're going to be saying, Rob, what are you doing? You're paying
Right.
two people to do one
Absolutely.
job. What's going on here? Well, Bill's been here for a long time and he's a good guy. He's got a family, he's got all this other stuff. And it's like, hey, this is part of leadership. Leadership isn't for the faint at heart. I
That's right.
signed up for this job.
Right.
Nobody made me start a business. Nobody made me stay the CEO. Nobody forced me to do any of that stuff. So when those decisions have to be made, I can't cry on somebody's shoulder or blame anybody. I chose
Hmm.
to do this. And I knew I didn't know in the beginning what I was getting myself into, but there was a point where, hey, you could turn around, you could hire somebody, you could sell it, you could work for somebody, you could do all these other things. But no, I chose to stay in the seat and I'll stay here and I'll tell our team, I'll continue to be the CEO and run this company till it comes a point where I don't believe I can effectively do that.
Hmm.
And then I'll either hire somebody to do it or promote somebody. Something different, something will change. But that's, the
Sure.
beginning when I said that I invest over $100,000 a year on myself, that's because I'm continuing to learn and grow. Um, but if there comes a point where I'm like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, um,
Hmm.
and I have no idea where to. to figure it out. Because there are days where I wake up, I'm like, man, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Bill, you have a very thoughtful approach to leading your business, and so
Oh,
let's
thank you.
switch gears a little bit
Yeah.
to the future, right? What does the future look like for National Fleet Management? What does the next
Yeah.
3 to 5 years look like for you?
Yeah, great question. So the next 3 to 5 years, by end of 2028, the goal is to get to $100 million in top line revenue. Currently, our EBITDA percentage is just below 10%. So without having to add any more heavy SG&A and the way that the business is structured right now, we believe that by getting to that 100, that's going to put our EBITDA percentage in the high teens, the low 20s. At that point, too, we should be able to stockpile a lot of cash. Um, and then that sets us up for the next infrastructure scaling reorganization or whatever you want to call it, where you add another layer of leadership. Maybe you bring in a minority investor um, to de-risk a little bit. I don't know. It's like the next fork in the road. It's like, okay,
Right.
what do we do here? At that point, um, it creates options, all kinds of options, but we need to execute. If we don't execute, I'm not here to talk about this next year. But we have to execute. So that's part of the risk reward of being a business owner.
Mhm. That's a heck of a goal. You said you're about 30 million now, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And a goal of 100 million, more than tripling the business
Yep.
in 2 years. You said
Beginning of
2028?
2028, so 3 years. Yeah, 3 years.
Okay, 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a BHAG, right? The big,
Yeah,
hairy,
yeah.
audacious goal.
Yep.
What would be preventing you from accomplishing that, or what would be getting in your way?
Um, I would say, kind of like what's going on right now with the economy, with geopolitics. Uh, Not so much the economy. I think the economy is in really good shape, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of cash sitting there, but until we figure out what's going on with the tariffs, we don't even know what the rules of the game are. If you think about it, we've been screwing around with tariffs for over a year now. And there's all this money sitting there that people want to invest, and they don't know, okay, do we continue to buy from China? Do I need to start building a factory here? Do I need to start creating other alliances? And everybody is like playing with all these things, but nobody's made a commitment because we don't know what the rules are. Once we know what the rules are, I believe capitalism works better than any system ever thought about. Capitalism works, and I believe the American businessmen, are some of the best business people in the world. And once we know what rules we're playing by,
Hmm.
watch out. We'll kill it. But
Hmm.
nobody knows what the rules are. Like I said, we still don't know what the tariff thing is all about. Last year we missed our mark fairly significantly. And I'll blame 90% of it on execution, but 10% of it was the tariff situation,
Sure.
the construction, interest rates. So, that's not helping us. We're still growing. We still grew significantly, 21%. The goal was 35%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe we could have hit that number had we had the tariffs figured out by February or March.
Right.
Um, but I don't know that for certain, but I believe we could have. It would have made, and you always have to be prepared for things.
Sure.
So I think that's the only thing that's really going to hold us back. I feel very confident in our cash position right now. Um, I feel we've got some of the best leaders right now. We've got the best leadership team that we've ever had. And they're fully aligned with the goals and the vision. So yeah, I don't know, other than like I said, the tariffs and the geopolitics.
Sure.
Um, a lot has happened geopolitically in the last 6 months that I don't think
Yes, it has.
anybody, yeah, yeah, that anybody anticipated. Um,
Right. Well, Bill, it sounds like you're well on the way. It sounds like you've got a pretty well-oiled machine, not to use a trucking
yeah,
analogy there, but sounds like you're well on the way to reaching that BHAG goal of 100 million in 3 years. Listen,
Thank you.
do you have any last words of advice for a small to mid-sized business trying to navigate growth through these times?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. If anybody is thinking about growing or scaling a business, this is what I would tell them. This is the advice I would give them. However hard you think it's going to be 10 times as hard as what you think it's going to be.
That's good advice.
But it's also going to be worth every minute of it if you stick to it. But you have
Yeah.
to understand, there's going to be sacrifices, and you just got to be willing to. You can't negotiate with it. There's fundamentals to business and scaling and growing a business there's sacrifices that are required. There's a formula for it. You're not going to create anything new that's not already out
Mm,
there, and you have to
mm,
understand what those not consequences, what the dues is required to be paid and what sacrifices need to be paid. And you need to either commit to it or don't commit to it. If you're not going to commit to it, then don't. You're going to be very frustrated. But it will be 10 times as hard as you think, and it'll be 10 times as rewarding as you think. So,
I, Bill, I think that's the best piece of advice you could have left us
oh,
with. So
thank you.
thank you very much. Again, this is Bill Black. He's the founder, CEO, and owner of National Fleet Management. Bill, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?